Welcome, everyone, to our podcast, Dog Talk. And today I have the honor of having Stewart Jones joining us for this podcast. A little bit about Stewart. Like many of us, Stewart Jones was first introduced to boating at a young age. His family built a boat when he was 10, and the rest is history. My God, by the way, that would be my dream. I grew up in the wrong family, Stewart. Stewart has a lifetime of rigging industry experience as well as offshore sailing, and we're going to be talking about that. He runs Pro-Tech Yacht Services, full-service rigging and metal fabrication shop in North Vancouver. And Pacific Yacht Systems is also based here in Vancouver. Stewart has participated in 3 Victoria to Maui races. So that's Victoria from Vancouver Island all the way to Maui, Hawaii, and was on the winning boat twice. So congrats. He also participated in 2 Admirals Cup races in the UK, both on the boat, and I might not pronounce that right, Pachena from Vancouver. Has spent numerous years.
Oh, it's right here, Jeff. It's on the map. Pachena Point.
That's right. By the way, my English and pronunciation is not a skill I have, and I'm okay with it. My brother teases me about it all the time. He has spent numerous years on the board of the BC Marine Trades Association and Boating BC, heavily involved with the West Vancouver Yacht Club, which is a yacht club here in Greater Vancouver, teaching sailing as a youth, serving as a board member, and also commodore, and now is an honorary life member of that yacht club. Stewart is the principal race officer, and Pro-Tech is the title sponsor of the annual youth sailing event called the Pumpkin Bull Regatta, which has been seen up to 246 youth and 100 volunteers each year in October. Throughout his career, Stewart has always focused on safety, and that's important, especially when it comes to rigging. After a very windy straight race, Stewart was one of the 4 founding principals instructors of the offshore personal survival course, when referred to as Safety at Sea course, that is offered in British Columbia. This course has international accreditation and is run totally by volunteers. First met Stewart years ago. Stewart, you probably didn't even know who I was back then. I remember when I bought my boat, my Catalina 36, I was in your shop getting help, like many people, coming to the front counter when I was doing most of my work myself on my boat, and your team helped me out. At that time, I didn't have any budgets like I made today, and over the years, I've got to know Stewart, working with many clients that we have in common. And recently, Stewart did a bunch of work on my Catalina, and I'm very thankful. So, Stewart, thank you for joining the podcast.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here, Jeff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We get to talk about boats and sailing, and
yeah, exactly. Doesn't get much better than boating. That's right. If you're not going to be on the water dreaming, we're talking about boating is the next best thing. So I remember we were out in the parking lot at your office there one evening not so long ago, and I started asking, and you've got this crazy racing experience, which I think is really brings the racing boats. I mean, you're pushing those boats to the limits, and that experience, and you've raced obviously. Can you tell me a little bit about how your racing background is sort of influencing how you run your outfit and what you guys do there, especially vis-a-vis safety?
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I sailed with my family and we raced our family boat. And then I moved on and started racing with other people. And luckily, I met some of the great personalities and racers of Vancouver and sailed with them. And one of the first guys was Vladimir Plazvik, who was kind of like a crazy Yugoslav. Very enthusiastic. So lots of things happened, but it also opened up huge doors. And I got to sail with, he would bring in professionals from California, Dick Deaver and other guys to check out the sails and check out the boat. And that's how you learn, from being around people that are like real rock stars, not just local ones. And I was super fortunate there. And then I moved on to sail with a guy called great sailing personality, John Newton, who took his boat to Europe twice. And I was really fortunate. My summer job while I was going to university was actually running his boat. So I'd run his boat here in Vancouver, take it to all the races, and then pack it up and put it on a freighter, and then pick it up in London and rig it all up. And then we sailed in the Admirals Cup, and then just doesn't end there. Like the Vancouver crew would then head home, and then it was my job to deliver the boat wherever it happened to be and pack it all up again. So a pretty outstanding summer job, but I got to meet people from all around the world. All around the world. People think that a race ends when you kind of get to the finish line in somewhere like England, and then you find out that, oh yeah, Stewart, yeah, just take the boat to Norway and it'll come home from there. And like, just that little sentence is a huge undertaking. But yeah, you meet so many fantastic people when you get to do some of this stuff.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about, isn't it, Jeff?
100%. And you learn so much from others. That's a great. I think it's the same. The marine. I mean, it's probably like that in every industry, but specifically in the marine industry, because you have to learn so much on the job. You can only prepare so much in class, and a lot of it is, you're right, it's sort of meeting the challenges, but also leveraging from the experience of others, and wanting them to do things right, of course. When you went, and I think that's really fascinating, because as boaters, some of us certainly have heard of the Fastnet sail in, was it 1979?
Yeah, 79.
Yeah, so you were one of the, I'm not sure, unlucky participants. How would you even define the chance of living?
No, we were very lucky. We all lived. 15 people died that night, so we're super fortunate.
You were a kid back then. You were saying, how old were you when that happened?
I was 25. Yeah.
Wow. 25 years old. Yeah, that must be like going to war, honestly, that night like that.
Yeah, well, yeah. But you have your teammates around you, right? The crew.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, some of them are kind of incapacitated by stuff like that, and other people just push on through and are able to. So it's like, it's mind and body. They both have to work together. Some people, their mind is going good and their body isn't.
Yeah, no kidding. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately about actually people living really difficult situations, and you hear about stuff like that. You want to give a little bit of context to everyone in terms of what Fastnet in '79 was all about, just so that people have a sense, a little bit of what we're talking about here?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, so how do you explain it? So we live in a technological age, and in '79, people don't realize kind of there was no standards for very many things. We would have a very minor safety check before a race.
Yeah.
So being that there's no standards, just to give you a point, like the safety harnesses that you use and the hooks that you hook onto the boat with in a storm or at night, they're all homemade. So they're basically 3-strand rope with kind of a cheap stainless steel carabiner with no safeties or anything on it. There was no inflatable PFDs. We would have like Elfstrom life jacket with some extra webbing that we attached to keep the safety harness on it. There was no GPS. There was no Loran-C. All we navigated with was dead reckoning off lighthouses and points of land. And then we did have signals off some of the lighthouses that we were using to hone in on. So yeah, it was really primitive. And unfortunately, the wind picked up tremendously. Like there's many books about it. And a lot of people in England, it was just a local race to them. Obviously, this was no little local race to us. We had come the whole way from North America. And the boats in Admirals Cup, there was about 56 of us, and there's 3 boats per country. So we are racing a separate division, and these boats are pretty well prepared with pretty experienced sailors from all these different countries. But a lot of the local boats in England, they were just guys that had phoned up their buddies and said, oh, let's go to a Fastnet race this year. Oh, when is it? Oh, tomorrow or 2 days. So they didn't spend that much time really preparing it because it was just a thing for them. So unfortunately, the wind increased dramatically, 65 knots and enormous waves. And I talked to Jeff about it. He wondered how bad it was. And I said, well, the water was really warm because there's a super warm current comes up through there from the south. So it wasn't cold, but the conditions were obviously dreadful. And the smaller boats just, they weren't as well prepared as they might have been if there was strict controls. And they're just, obviously a small boat is affected way more by waves. And the waves were like tremendously tall, like higher than the mast by a lot. And in the troughs, they were so short and tiny. They weren't big ocean waves. They're short, kind of semi-inshore waves. So there was no wind in the bottom of the waves.
Wow.
Which
what a contrast.
People find it hard to believe. But on the top of the waves, the boat would go flat with just like a storm jib on, no main. And when we're down in the bottom of the wave, there was not hardly enough wind to sail. So very different conditions. And most of the damage was really done by the waves, not by really the wind. And a combination. Yeah, it was frightening night, frightening the next 2 or 3 days after, as boats were pulled. We ended up at the Royal Cork Yacht Club, which was, we sailed just about 24 hours after we dropped out of the race just to get to a safe harbor. And, they would tow boats in that were like basically barely floating above waterline with masts broken off and gear everywhere. And we had no idea if everyone on that boat had died or they'd been rescued or what, because the fishermen were just bringing these boats in and then dropping them off and leaving. Yeah, it's not, when we go sailing, we don't expect to see kind of visible signs of huge trauma. So anyways, that's kind of set me on the thing of like making sure that, you see a couple of things like that and then you go like, no, safety is pretty important. Pretty important.
Was that a genesis, a little bit of what the spark in part that made you, I mean, obviously you have an interest in boating, but is that why in part you started the rigging aspect of boating and doing such a high standard of doing so?
Yeah, well, I was doing lots of rigging anyways. Like I had been working part-time for the mast company in Vancouver, and I'd go and do trips to California, or even when I was in England, I'd go and visit the other mast companies, be it on dinghy mast companies or other rigging companies, because you just want to look deeper into the subject you're involved in. Like some people don't look deep at all. We know those people, and then other people you get satisfaction of finding out how other people do stuff. And that's the great thing about going around the world or moving to different cities and seeing stuff, is that your whole knowledge isn't created by what you see in your local environments.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. And that's also the power of now of even a medium like YouTube, is the participation. I mean, it's the same thing I do even on I learn from the readers, just from their questions, and you learn from, there's no such thing as a dumb question. You learn, you're like, oh, what's the angle? Like, what can I learn from that question? Where are they going? What's the missing piece of the puzzle? And you're right, as much as we live in a world where we're lucky. I mean, we all can make a living. A lot of us here in Vancouver can make a living just working on boats. But it's still a limited body of experience. It's not the whole world. It's just what we see here locally is what we get to work on.
Yeah. The interesting thing, Jeff, is that I tell people, like, everyone's got a different vision in their mind of what they think. And we don't have a TV into a person's mind. We can only listen to what they say. And so from dealing with many people over the years, for us to be successful for a customer, a particular customer, we have to the only thing we have to do, we don't have to like create the space shuttle or anything. It's a really simple thing. We just have to answer their anxiety level. Right. And everyone's got a totally different anxiety level. You can have someone that's like feel so safe within their skin and everything that they don't need anything.
Yeah,
Like
it's true.
they can do anything. And then there's other people are so apprehensive about everything in the world, and then you stick them on a boat. Well, holy cow. We
Yeah.
hardly have enough time to deal with them because the anxiety level creates so many possibilities, and it's your job and my job to fulfill that. And they're a successful, happy customer when they have no anxiety left. And
It,
so we call them sometimes needy because they need lots of stuff and lots of things to reassure them. And then the next person you might talk to, Jeff, he doesn't want anything except the piece of equipment in a box, and he feels comfortable he can do it. Perhaps he doesn't even need that thing in a box. But
yeah.
yeah, everyone's so different, and we have to answer that anxiety level. If you've done that, then we're successful with every customer.
It's such a good point that you bring. I describe it when I hear of people buying a used boat, which is, most people end up buying a boat that is not brand new. I tell them, you got to remember you're buying that person, that previous owner's risk tolerance.
Yeah,
That previous owner decided what was important and what wasn't. And once the boat leaves the factory and it's been owned 10 years, 5 years, 15 years. In my case, my boat was 1990, bought it in 2006, so 16 years, three owners. You literally have three layers of ownership where their risk tolerance is all different, i.e., their anxieties, right? What do
yeah,
they worry about? And some people don't worry about them much. And so the challenge is when we all work on boats is you're not only adapting to and meeting the needs of the current owner, but you also have to backtrack and see where is it that the previous owner had a risk tolerance for, and does that align with the new owner? And where are the differences between the old owners, so willing to just take chances, and the new
yeah,
owners going, hey, you know what? I'm bringing my grandkids on board. This is totally pleasure boating. If the missus is going to come on board, I don't want to have I want to minimize surprises. Everybody's already apprehensive of going on the water,
yeah,
reduce risk as much as possible so that my experiences on the water are positive. And
yeah.
you're right. It's everyone has a different sort of tolerance to risk.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And the questions how they start. Like my funniest day is always when a person phones up, like just like you and me, we have to find out a little bit something. Like what's the scope, what's the boat, what's this? And you ask a guy, well, what kind of boat do you have? And the guy looks at it and he says, sailboat. You have to go like, you want to say something like, we aren't getting anywhere here. You have to kind of open up. So like, how big is it? And how old is it? And all this. And that's the funniest thing is you and myself trying to figure out where a customer is coming from and what he has. Because some people don't have a very good tolerance for telling you much. They want to be private. And they need to open up if we're going to do a good job for them and realize where they're trying to go and what their goal is. That's how we create what a person needs.
Yeah, totally. It's we have the same. It's funny when we started our company. I mean, our company is only not that old. We started in '07, so maybe 14, 15 years ago, 14. And it was the same thing. It's about that conversation. Like what are you planning to do with the boat? Describe the boat. How long have you had the boat? And what are you going to be doing with that boat? Because all of us boat differently. And so
Yeah.
there's no cookie cutter solution for everyone. There's no size one size. There is no one size fit all for boats. You know, um, even common boats like Catalina or Grand Banks doesn't matter. Every boat owner over time, that boat, even though they were all the same at the factory when they came out, over time they've evolved to basically adjust to the need of the owners and the budgets of the owners as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Lots of evolution going on.
lots.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about so that Fastnet rate must have been pretty incredible. So you were back then, you were about, I think you remember saying about 25, 26 when that happened?
Yeah, so I was 20. I had like three really fortunate summers. So when I was 25, I spent the summer beginning here, delivering the boat around to the different regattas, and then taking it to England, and then taking it, and then I call it shipwrecked in Ireland. But anyways, we ended up in Ireland, and I had to then get some people together to take the boat back to the south coast of England, and then from the south coast of England, I took it to Norway. And I was going to university then, and I missed the first 2 weeks of university, but my brain was at such a high level from this summer. Like, honestly, I was no farther behind than anybody else because it was a pretty exciting time. So I was 79, 1980. We there's a whole bunch of youth all my age, so we all went and did Victoria and Maui race the next year. So again, we spent the whole summer on the water, and we're all young, and so we raced down. We raced in the Kenwood Cup, which was a series down in Hawaii. It was called Clipper Cup at that time. So that lasted there's 5 races, including one that was 850 miles or so that went around the whole state of Hawaii. And then because none of us had any money, we all sailed boats home. So that was 1980. And then in 1981, we built a new boat to go to England. So I went to San Diego and helped finish building the boat in January and February, and then brought the boat back from Los Angeles to Vancouver on a truck, and then put the boat back together again here, did the races in Vancouver to get the boat up to speed, and then took the boat all apart, put it on a cradle, and shipped it to England on a freighter again. And then I picked it up in England and rigged it all so that it would be all ready for racing. And that boat is called Pear Mare now, and it sits at Royal Van, but it was Pachena when we built it. And it was lightning fast boat. It was a really fast boat. So I have a picture of Admirals Cup in 1981, and after the first race, Canada was the top team in the world. So we had good boats. And one of Canada's other boats was Graham Kirby, who designed the Laser. It was his boat, and he designed that boat. And the third boat was Amazing Grace, which is around the Lower Mainland here, but at that time it came from Ontario. So we came 10th in the Fastnet race that year, which is a pretty big accomplishment. And so, yeah, there's 3 great summers of like total boating at a high level. So it was great.
You got to be hooked after that. I mean, if you weren't, you got to be like, I got to get myself on the water. I'll make a job out of this.
Well, you just feel so fortunate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's there's definitely a boating community here in British Columbia. Washington State, of course, very similar.
Yeah, very similar.
Very, very similar. With that body of water and Vancouver Island that protects us. I mean, there is so much opportunity to go boating here. And if you want to go on the outside, you're welcome to. If you want to stay on the inside and more protected, you're welcome to. So it's there's an inland, I call it an inland sea, where things are, they can be pretty bad, but most of the time they're pretty benign. And then, so tell me, you also, I thought that was so cool. A few years ago, you and your son, and I think also the owner of the boat and their son also you did a Vic Maui. Tell me about that. How was that as an experience to go racing and having a father-son team on the boat like that? That must be just up there.
Yeah, well, it's just, the evolution of how this friendship came. Like, we were dinghy sailors. The owner of the boat, Peter Salisbury. So he was what we call a keen eagle sailor. He came from Eagle Harbor, and I was from West. So we all, in the youth sailing, we all knew each other. And Peter carried on more in dinghies. So like, he sailed Flying Dutchmans, and so he met Ted Turner when Ted Turner was a dinghy sailor. And he's still, as a young person or a middle-aged person, Ted Turner was still a character. Like, he would start talking and everyone would be around him because he just says outrageous stuff and he's a character, right? And so Peter sailed dinghies more than I did. I sailed dinghies, but then I kind of moved on and did other stuff. And so we sailed together to Hawaii and won the race in 1980. He had done the trip to Europe similar that I had done in 2 years earlier. So in 1975, he went with Vladimir Plazvik in his boat to Admirals Cup. And he was the one that, the same kind of job I did. He took care of the boat, and after the races, he sailed the boat up to Sweden or something, and then all the way down to Yugoslavia and the Mediterranean, and then back across the Atlantic to Florida, where Vancouver sailors got on it and Seattle sailors, and they did a big series of races in Florida and then trucked the boat to Vancouver. So we have a fairly similar background in working for these boats and doing deliveries pretty young. So we sailed together on different boats in Vancouver quite a bit. And Peter we get along really well. And so he decided kind of 8 years ago that he had enough money. And I said, like, okay, well, if you got enough money, it means you can't if you're going to do a big project like this, you got to make sure you got enough money. You aren't going to have to eat peanut butter sandwiches every day to afford it. You got to have, it's a big deal. And so he decided that he wanted to design a boat and work with a designer, design a boat that we could both, our sons are approximately the same age, we could race to Hawaii together on, and then bring the boat back here and do other stuff. So we went to different people that were designing boats. He did most of the work. And we sat down with these different designers and came up with some ideas. And then we picked a designer, which was Paul Beaker out of Seattle at the time. And he's one of the few carbon engineers in the world, and he does these fantastic things with carbon fiber and totally understands it. Like, the F1 guys come and see him when they're trying to design stuff because they know he's got the engineering and the feel and can build everything himself as well. So he's unbelievably capable. He did all the stuff for the America's Cup. When the Americans started to win in San Francisco, he had been called in to redesign the stuff. So he's a total foil expert and sail expert, and yeah, he's an amazing guy and super down to earth. So he designed this boat, and then we went around to different people to build it. So we talked to different people that had different kinds of setups, and some of them were at the transition stage, like they were building boats one way, and the opportunity to build this boat for us would then set them up for the future, because they just kind of just like every technology, when there's a new technology, you have to kind of embrace it. Then you got to have someone that kind of gives you the lift and the step to move on. It's really hard to get there, right? And so this boat is, 35 feet long. It's got a retractable drive unit, so no propeller hangs down in the water. It's got 1,200 pounds of water ballast. And at 35 feet long, it weighs barely over 6,000 pounds. So there's just no weight. It's all horsepower. And so we put this together. Then we found out we had this incredible boat that went so fast that it was also a big handful, because it's like, it's got its own heart and mind, right? And so we quickly realized that it was a little bit too much for 4 people to handle. And we did really well in it here. It's a tremendous boat. And we sailed in Hawaii, and we went with a crew of 6 the first year, which included both our sons and then 2 other people. Jeremy Hill, who's another one of our great friends. And he had done he had done the same races to Hawaii that we had done, but he had never gone sailing in Europe. And he had done lots of time dinghy sailing. And so the 6 of us went, and we realized that we won the race, and the boat was just so fantastic because it's always in control. It's a beautifully designed boat, and all the systems work really well, and they're quite different than what you would see on a normal boat around here. Nothing the same as a cruising boat. And yeah, everything works really easily. It's, the only thing that's not easy is sleeping, because the thing goes so freaking fast and makes so much noise, it's hard to sleep. So, just doing deliveries, you might be trying to go slow, and you'd be doing like 6 or 7 or 8 knots, and then all of a sudden it gets on a wave, and it's this surfboard that just wants to go, and then you can't slow it down. All of a sudden you're doing 18 knots, and the poor people downstairs can't sleep. So this has just happened just 3 years ago when we did a delivery to Los Angeles for the Transpac race. you can't slow it down. It just wants to go. So we did
What
that
was
race. The first Big Maui was 6 people.
Mhm.
And then we decided that, we really needed to push it. And because if you have 6 people, then you have 6 people's clothes, and then you have 6 people's water and 6 people's food. So the more weight you put on this, in effect, the slower you go. So we decided we were going to do it with 4. So our 2 sons by then were busy doing other stuff. My son had started to have children and other things like that. So that opportunity wasn't there. And Jimmy was working with his business up at Whistler. So we got Jeremy Hill came and joined us. He sailed on the first race. So he's been involved in the boat since it was launched. And we had another person. So there's 4 of us. And it was like absolutely crazy because we would be going for hours on end between 16 and 18 knots. And it wasn't a fun, like old fashioned Vic Maui, like the sun barely came out. We saw 1 sunrise and 1 sunset, and that was the very last night. So usually when you sail across an ocean, you're reveling in Mother Nature and all these different things, and teasing each other about people are seeing. Oh, have you seen that boat over there when they come up on watch? And you go like, no, but that's not a boat. They go, yeah, it's a boat. I can see it. And then like, of course, it's the moon coming up from the distance or something like that. All these little tricks that happen. But with 4 people, holy cow, it's like totally brutal. No coffee ever because there's absolutely no time to make coffee because 2 people are on deck and you quickly grab food and you realize if you ever had a man overboard, like there'd be 1 person left on deck because there's only 2 of you. And if you're going 16 knots, it's just frightening what might happen. So yeah, we're super safety conscious, and we have beacons so we're all electronically attached to the boat. But yeah, it's pretty neat. And then recently they just completed the Transpac race 2 years ago. So it's done 3 trips to Hawaii, the boat, and it's called Longboard.
Yeah, I got a chance to see it. We did very little work on it, and I was impressed. I have to say,
It's impressive.
it's impressive, and great things don't have to be big. And you saw that boat, and I was like, it's like it's like to me, it's like a Mclaren, which I only see. There's a few McLarens in town, of course, in Vancouver, and you get to see them. You're like, yeah, maybe not a big car, but that is a hell of a car. And I remember coming on board, and I was like, whoa, this is a racehorse. This is something else. You didn't mention the builder, designer. Who was the builder of that boat, by the way?
So the designer was Beaker, and then the builder was in Anacortes, and he did quite a bit of work on the America's Cup down there. So I can't. His name escapes me for the moment.
I think it's Jim Betts. Is that right?
Yeah, Jim Betts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super nice guy. Fantastic boat shed that he had, a boat shop down there. It had because they're working in composites, they have it's like heat controlled building. So the floor has heat in it. And they vacuum bag all the panels, and just the manufacturing boat, it's like ultra high tech. Like they make panels up, they do CNC routing of all the pieces, and then they're folded up, and then a tab is put on them, and you've got a whole big component made. It's amazing.
Yeah, I haven't seen that level of boat building, but I have seen just seeing at Platinum, we had Tim on the podcast. I've seen him build 100 footers, 120 footers, 150 footers, and the amount of thought process and solutioning that is involved for those builders, the amount of head scratching, the amount of problems that come up, the puzzles that they have to solve. You get tremendous respect for those people because every day they're challenged. There's always something that's going to come up. I mean, there's just no other way. It's just there's not a lot of repetition in the boat building, especially in the custom. So yeah, they're definitely problem solvers.
So these boats that So it's actually when you say these problem solvers. So of course, Platinum, they're like fixing and working on these big boats that have already often been started. But on this boat, it was a build from a piece of paper and a computer.
Mm.
So these guys actually did no problem solving because all the pieces are so well drawn out and
Oh,
they're all routed. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. If the chain plates where the chain plate goes onto the hull, so that's foam. So that panel of foam, when it's lying as a flat piece before it gets put onto the mold when the boat is being built, they actually, around the chain plate, they route the foam out for every single layer of carbon fiber cloth. So you'll see a graduated levels around the chain plate that are micro thin for each level of cloth that is reinforcing that. So by the time that reinforcing area has its like 8 layers in one spot and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, if you look at the foam, it's been routed out like that. So by the time in the build, when they're adding the outside layer onto the hull and vacuum bagging it on, there's no fairing really whatsoever because all the fairing has been done by routing out the foam to those different levels. So it's a huge degree of like detail in the drawings end up with actually there's no interpretation. Like there's only one place things can go, and you make components up and fold them together, and you just stick them in, and they automatically fit. So it's incredibly how fast you can do it. But that's a level of an intensity and detail that's done at the beginning. So if you don't do that, you aren't going to get a boat that's going to turn out. It's going to have tons of foam, and people try and interpret it, as you said, what's going on, and then like those hours just ka-ching, ka-ching go up, right? So it's
can you
interesting.
give into context? What was your best day? Like most sailors talk about nautical miles per day for sailing. So when you're on longboard, what was what's the best day that you've done for a run on
So
long
we're,
nautical
you know,
miles?
well, from Maui or from all the way from Victoria to Hawaii, we average like around 10 knots or a little bit more. So that includes beating out of Juan de Fuca and then turning the corner and the times when you're putting the boat back together after some crazy incident. And um, yeah, so we spend hours on end sometimes going like 16 knots and 18 knots for hours. And we're not, because of that, like it's hard to understand if you sail like a CNC 40 or any of these 43 footers, we don't really surf. So we don't sit on a wave and then all of a sudden, if everything's perfect, go flying down the wave and accelerate. We're already accelerated because we're actually planing. So it's just like a powerboat with the motor at 3/4 throttle, and you can feel the bottom of the boat moving up and down on your feet. That's exactly when it's that windy. That's what we're doing. So we only increase in speed a little bit on a wave. We will increase in speed, but normally the boat speed indicator, if you're doing 16 or 18 knots, it's staying on, depending on the wind and how you have the sail set, it'll be sitting for 5 minutes or longer at exactly the same decimal speed
Wow.
because the boat's just set up with the wind at the same angle and the boat's got the bow way up in the air and the stern down. And it's just like a powerboat with the motor going. There's no
How does that
difference.
feel? How does that feel to? I mean, it's to me. It's almost like you sit back and you imagine all the. I mean, you saw the old way.
Yeah.
Boats weren't doing that in the 50s or 60s, 70s, right? I mean, how does
Oh,
it
well,
feel?
there's hardly any boats do that these days still.
How did that feel
That
to
boat does
that
because
experience?
yeah, yeah. Well, at first, like it's breathtaking. Then you get used to it like everything else. Yeah, it's very fun.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, there she is, longboard.
she's beautiful. She's always out of the water in the parking lot. I see her all the time. She doesn't have any marine growth on it. Yeah,
No.
it's something else. Absolutely. So what are the trends that you've been seeing in your industry over the last few years? What are the things that, and also, second part of that question is like, what do you see happening in the future in the marine industry, specifically related to rigging and fabrication on your
Yeah.
side?
Well, we're finding now that people are embracing some of the more expensive gear more. So, like everything, as soon as you move to a higher level, things cost more. But now it's really understood at a way higher level that if you spend a little bit more money for a piece of rope, that there's actually a return back to it. Like the rope is actually going to work better for you.
Mm,
So there's always going to be people that are trying to do it on a really short budget. But if you've got money and you've got a super nice boat, then the rope is going to make a huge difference because it's way lighter. It doesn't absorb water, so it doesn't get heavy on a rainy day. You tighten it up, and the length isn't going to change because it's not going to be stretchy. And so we're finding like it's a lot more acceptable to spend more money on rope. That's a huge thing, and the boat works way better. So
yeah.
yeah, so we see that like what we would call yacht braid, which is like which we would call it crummy polyester rope. It's not a nice thing to say, but it's pretty basic.
Yeah.
Is we're selling less and less of that product and more ropes that have a core out of a way better fiber. So that would be usually it's Dyneema or Spectra,
Yeah.
and those ropes perform so much better. Way less friction from because the diameter is a little bit smaller and the length stays the same. So yeah, way more dependable. And the covers, because you're paying a little bit more, then they're made better. So the rope doesn't get dirty as quick and doesn't look like it's wearing out as quick. And yeah, you there's value in it. It's not just like buy this because it's expensive. There actually is huge value and way better longevity. So we see the rope as better, and there's more and more companies now making ball bearing blocks with better bearing systems in them. And then those blocks are also lighter, so they don't bang against the boat as badly and they just work better. So yeah, I think it's people are embracing the fact that from their everyday life they understand technology and someone's not selling them some kind of piece of thing that they don't need. That I guess that's really it is. People embrace technology now better than they did 10 years ago because they see
Nice.
it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. We see the same thing. Once it's all about the value proposition, right? Unfortunately, it's not the least expensive is the best value, or the most expensive is the best value. That you got to do some homework, and there's always, there's some stuff that, of course, there's a premium. Certainly in my industry, there is a premium on certain items, but it's not as like everything else is just, everything below the lowest price is just BS. Now, same thing with batteries, with anything that we're doing is the same thing. You find that sweet spot for your budget, and what can you appreciate why you would be spending your money on this item, and that's
Yeah.
part of the education and learning. What are the benefits from anything that you're going to buy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing with, we talk about race people, but equally with cruising people, the cruisers around here, they embrace technology, but we were always so upset because all the cruisers would embrace the technology of refrigeration and
All right.
then all the technical stuff because it's really easy to do. Like you can just go and buy it. You can go see Jeff, and Jeff's gonna fix you up with all this stuff. And then we get the guy, and the guy goes, "No, I got ropes. No, no, my sails goes in and out. Yeah, I'm fine." And they
Yeah.
felt that the most important thing going offshore was buying the stuff that went in the boat. And we
Yeah.
would tell them, no, no, it's like once you leave here, it's all about how it sails. Because around here, as you've seen, so many people have sailboats, but they just motor.
Yeah.
And you have to rely on all your sailing gear once you leave Vancouver and go offshore. And it's a quick lesson because the mouth of Juan de Fuca, you go outside of Vancouver Island, as soon as you get there, it's ugly. And then you go, wow, we don't really have the gear for this. So I was always upset because I try and sell stuff and people were all interested in electrics and refrigeration and other stuff. They weren't interested in their sailing because they felt that around here they could handle sailing so well.
Mm.
And I was always so angry. No, you're going to go and help all those guys in San Francisco and San Diego that have their businesses there, and not me. I was always
Yeah,
jealous.
that's right. They pull in. They're like this. I've seen it countless times, by the way. Same thing. They pull into all these ports down on California, and they're like, "Yeah, this broke, that broke, this broke. Yeah, need to do this, need to do that." And then they get and now they obviously, because being on the water, I mean,
Yeah.
you find out the truth. It's gonna happen. And
Oh,
then
the truth is
and
hard.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Always hard. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think in some ways, I don't know, the same thing I think with the internet in some ways is now that people are sharing, we learn not only from our own mistakes, but from the mistakes of others. I use that all the time. I'm like, like everything, all the many valuable life lessons I've learned were on my own boat and other people's boat, seeing their pain, seeing, how, and then you go, okay, like I don't have to live the trauma to learn from it. I don't have to literally live it first person. And I think the internet is a way for people that are curious, depending on the anxiety that you said, if they're about to research, then they go like, oh yeah, okay. You got way more, you don't want to over prepare. And certainly there is an argument where some people prepare forever and never leave. And it's finding that balance between going in completely. And I've heard great stories of people just going. I mean, they're just doing it. And they, it was not easy and they were young generally. And then there's the people that prepare forever. And because of life, life changes and they never get to live that dream. So it's, you don't want to be at both ends, but you got to find the balance for yourself somewhere in the middle between no preparation and just forever preparation.
Yeah.
And that's the
Oh, it's a
hard part.
great balance. It is a great balance. Like, yeah, that's the fun thing about seeing how people rationalize what they're going to spend their money on.
Yes.
It's super interesting. And then for you and me, if we have the time, we try and go inside their head and go, okay, so why is he thinking like that?
Yeah.
And that's like, wow. Sometimes
It
you
is.
don't want to, but
No,
to
but
actually figure out, you have to convince a person about how they're thinking wrong. You have to try and figure out where that thought has come from.
yeah. Yeah. Questions are good for that, and people's motivations. It's interesting, a lot, the motivations are not all the same. There's so many different motivations. So many
I
of
need to
us.
tell you, one of the things that's really interesting, Jeff, is we've worked now with Jake from your company quite a bit
Yeah.
recently. And well, not recently, for the last couple of years. And then from myself talking to him and from feedback from my customers, like the two of us are, we're the heads of our company, but I see now how much our technicians add to the whole thing, because they have to, we tell the story, and then not a lot, but a number of customers just kind of like, they've had enough of us after we've said, like, talk to them for 5 minutes, because they think they're just getting the runoff on our industry. But the techs that work for us, they're the ones that give the confidence to the customers,
100%.
because they see them handling the stuff and how they, like in your business, they bang the buttons and it all comes up sometimes. And my guys, they go up the mast in like 2 seconds, and the people are going, whoa, okay, these guys are real. And
Yeah.
like, your technicians are real and our guys are real. And then the customers see that, and then they kind of like flow in line, and then they start to accept kind of the stuff that we're saying. And there was a huge period of time in Vancouver where people did all their work themselves.
You're
So it
mentioning
was,
that. Yeah.
and so that's been a big evolution really in Vancouver, to have confidence that someone else is going to do the right job for them. So it's interesting, the changes, right?
Yeah, and I get it all the time. Most of the boaters that we deal with are self-made, meaning they've succeeded in a realm in their life enough to have disposable income, and they don't get easily bullshitted. They've got a good bullshit meter, and you're right, and they want a certain level. Like if they're gonna delegate the task to someone else, they don't want to come back, and they don't want to think that they could have potentially done it better or even
Yeah.
equal. Like they need to be wowed. It's sort of like, if I'm going to pay you all this money to do something, it better be better than what I could have done. And
Yeah.
you're right. That's where the technicians come in terms of making the promises that we make to our clients a reality, and inspiring them to know that, okay, I get it. These people have made a life out of actually making these ideas, these visions, right? What these dreams that we want to come true. And it's funny. I always think about all these beautiful castles when I was visiting Europe, and you'd see these doors into a room, and you'd hear that a father and son team had carved that door forever. And then you think about the craftsmanship that's involved in actually building all these things. And I think the boating world is very similar. Our effectively, I see a lot of what we do is like artistry. I think it's the ability of science and aesthetics coming together, because boats are beautiful, which makes them even more dangerous to all of us that are in love with them, because not only are they functional, but they're great. And then delivering that to the owners, and it's a great. I don't know. In some ways, I see that our owners are patrons of the arts, and the art that we do is the work that we do, and we enable them to have a better boat, which again, depending on their anxiety level, is what they want. They want a boat that is more reliable, safer, that they don't have to worry about. Yeah, it's true. It's cheesy, but it's so true. It's a real honor every time I walk away. And the same thing you guys did with my boat, and all of us do for all our clients, is giving them that confidence, because it is scary on the water. I think a lot of people maybe not admit it, but not every day on the water is bliss. I heard the expression. I don't know if you heard it. 99 days of bliss and 1 day of sheer terror. And I tell my clients, I'm like, if you haven't had the day of sheer terror, just wait. It's going to happen. And you don't know when it's going to happen. And it's one day that you didn't go out because you were an idiot and you didn't listen to the weather report. It's because you're going to have been caught in something that you should not have been caught in. And that day will certainly, it's going to be hard to forget. Hard to forget.
Oh yeah, well, everyone's lulled into this sailing in the Strait of Georgia, or they're lulled into the fact that it's never really bad.
Yeah.
And it is. Things
is.
happen. Things happen. Yeah, the safety at sea course, when we're teaching, we have different levels on there's different parts on heavy weather sails and sailing in strong winds, besides all the technology that has to do with, like, if you set off an EPIRB, what actually happens, who jumps out of bed and who springs into action. But the best thing that we tell sailors, like, if it's windy, like, don't take down your sails and go in. Actually go sailing for an hour or two in it, because you need to, like, get comfortable, because it's way different. Way different.
And again, you're right. You got to be outside your comfort zone, within reason, of course, to then be comfortable within the normal range. Because if it's always great, the moment it gets a little dicey, then that's where you're sort of like, I'm out. But the boats generally can handle more than we can, and so you want to find a reasonable amount in there where you're not quitting. Not quitting is the wrong word. Where you're not stopping yourself from enjoying being on the water because you haven't had the opportunity to gradually practice your way to a level where you feel comfortable. Yeah.
And we're always trying to do just like we're telling our customers about that they need to do things to their boat. We're always doing stuff in our businesses too. Like the equipment that we work with now is like way better than we had 10 years ago. We have, we don't have a drill press like a guy has in his basement with belts and that run it anymore. It's all geared. So when we're drilling a piece of stainless steel, we can power that drill bit down to going super slow. The belt's not gonna slip on it. We have, it's a power feed, so there's not a person pulling on it. You just press a button and it goes down and drills the hole, and the drill is still sharp because it's going at a proper rate and there's coolant and stuff. And so manufacturing, we've, water cutting all the different parts, so things are way cheaper to make now because we aren't cutting them on a saw and then grinding and doing all this. If we're going to make a custom part up for something, we design it on a drawing, we send it off to a water cutter, 3 days later it comes back and we just put it all together, and it's, apart from polishing a piece of metal, which there's no technology for that, it's like way better. And our swedging machines for handling, putting the ends on pieces of rigging, we've, we had pieces of equipment that were enormous and been built before the Second World War, and they did huge pieces of wire, and the whole building would shake. And then now we have this piece that's not very big, and it's all hydraulically driven, and it doesn't really make any noise. And it puts this, on a piece of half-inch wire, which is 30,000 pounds, attaches the fitting on with like no fuss. And it's amazing. So our industry, it's moved along. It hasn't stayed the same. Like, we build stuff a totally different way. The ends we put on rigging and that are all done in a way different way than we used to. And yeah, like, it's really sad. We take these big pieces of equipment that have gigantic flywheels on them. I guess it must be like 4 feet across, a flywheel, solid big chunk, and with great big belts onto it, enormous. And we like scrap the machine because it's not used anymore. It's kind of crazy, but it's the way the technology goes.
Yeah, and it's for the. I mean, in some part, it is for the better. It's about, and these boats too. Boats. I say, you see boats out there, 20, 30, 40 years old boat. I mean, it's pretty common. Not everyone has a brand new, not like a car or an iPhone. You're not swapping boats. I mean, some of them do, of course. Again, there's always exceptions, but the majority of owners are not buying a brand new boat every 2, 3, 4 years and then swapping for another one. Like, boats are going to age, and they're going to mature, actually, which I think there is a counterintuitive. They do get better out of the factory over a period of time, and then it starts declining. There's always a little bit of bugs or things that need to be ironed out in the systems on a boat over time. But then they're out in the field and they're out boating, and it's the same thing. Like, the reason why, decided to spend and invest in my boat, it's all the memories that you make on those boats. It's hard to just treat a boat as a car. For me, it's not the same. The boat is a vessel not only for transportation, but for all the memories, all the amazing things that you get to do on that boat. And it's emotional attachment to all these experiences, because you remember that you were on that boat everywhere and all the things you lived. And therefore, the gear that you put on, the gear that we put on to make those boats stay with the times, but yet the shell stays the way it was. And is, again, I think that's the beauty of it, is that you can keep those older boats in great shape by maintaining them, by putting the money in and doing. Of course, everyone has a budget, and not everyone can do everything, absolutely. But at least if you decide it's on your list that year or this whatever, then you can do it. There's going to be a place that can help you to bring it up. Yeah,
I think that's how they justify it. These boats create these family moments, right?
100%.
Like, the greatest pictures of your family are the stuff that happens like at Christmas holidays and summer holidays and other stuff. And like, for a huge part of the season, the boat is where it's all happening, and it keeps the family together. Like, I know when we built our first boat, we came from Montreal, and Eastern Canada, and we what did we do? My dad was one of the founding members of the North Shore Winter Club. Okay, because they had been doing all that stuff in Montreal their whole lives. Yeah. And so then they realized, like, that the Winter Club it's not family oriented. Like, you do nothing with your kids except family skates. Like, the parents curl, the kids either do figure skating or hockey, but it's not really a family thing. And so they kind of looked hard at each other and said, well, what are we going to do as a family? So we bought skis and built a boat. So there we were. Keeps the family together.
Your dad literally, so this happened when you were 10. So how long was the process to build a boat?
So we hired a guy. The boatyard is still there. So that was 1964. So it was right underneath the Oak Street Bridge in Richmond, and it was all cow fields there. And there's still the boatyard there. The shed is still there. It's right beside. There's a train bridge that goes
Oh, I
across the
know.
river there.
Yeah, I know exactly the one. Yeah.
And
And
so
how long was the boat? What was the length overall? The
it
size?
was a Thunderbird. It was 26 feet. It's plywood, and the guy that had the shipyard there, he repaired like log salvage boats and little tugs and stuff. He had a marine railway, so he did all the heavy work on building the boat. Like he had a bandsaw that was 12 feet high and huge pieces of timber for building a 26-foot boat, a Thunderbird. And so he worked on it in his spare time when he didn't have other jobs. And then we worked on it at night and on weekends. So
you were
yeah,
at
it basically took a year to build.
wow.
But yeah, 26-foot boat. And then I had two sisters, so we'd go away for 3 weeks, 5 people on a 26-foot boat. And then every single weekend, starting right after Easter and ending at Halloween. That's when the mass went back in from winter storage and came out for winter storage. And we would be either sailing or racing or spending the time at Gambier Island but there's so many of those boats. Even friends I have today, our parents all had the same boats, because for, I don't know, $3,500 you could have a boat. But at that time, that was probably pretty expensive. But
Yeah. It's funny. I was in Europe a few years ago in Croatia. And in Croatia, you get to see those, mega yachts. They're 200, 300, whatever feet. I mean, they're huge. They're palaces. And the flip side is, I remember seeing, and it's, again, Croatia, it's beautiful. And then I remember seeing a family. They had a Hunter. Oh my God, it must have been a 25-foot. I'm talking like no Dodger. There's no refrigeration, like open. And there was 5 kids, 2 parents. This thing was able to go on a trailer, and they were out there having the time of their life. And I was like, you know what? They're doing it. You don't need a 300-footer. You don't need to look at whatever's inside. One of the examples I give all the time, I'm like, you could have Mona Lisa inside your boat, 300-footer. You'd be here in British Columbia. You'd be like, yeah, that's really nice, but I'm going to look at the view. The view outside, what's outside. I mean, it's okay on a rainy day looking in the museum at art, but if you're into nature, the vistas and the life and the memories that you can build on the water with loved ones, and in that family, I can still see them. It was just like, I was like, how awesome is that? And they were teachers, and they would spend 2 months on the summer on this 25-foot boat, basically effectively camping. It's a tent with, a mast, and they can get places. And I was just like, yeah, the whole point is being on the water. It doesn't matter how big the boat is. It's not going to really change how much fun you're going to have. I mean, at the end of the day, you're either going to have fun or not. And if you've got a 100-footer or 200-footer, you're not in a happy state. You're the boat's not going to make a big difference. It's not. I mean, it helps, but it's not going to be a big difference. Yeah.
no, we live in this world, and we want to be around Mother Nature and see it. We had a customer so this is June 15th, basically. So a week ago, one of our customers was here for way too long. He was here because his engine broke down. He was stuck up my dock, and we were trying to get rid of him to get other boats in. And he's a super nice guy. And so Drew from North Sales was going to say, he keeps his boat in Secret Cove because he couldn't get a place closer to Vancouver. And so Drew was going to sail with him up the coast to show him how his boat worked. And because this was the second summer we've worked on it, and Drew had done stuff from North Sales. So he left here in the morning. And so last week it was blowing from the east. So they ran out, and along the side of Bowen Island, there was like 3 or 4 humpback whales jumping like right out of the water and landing flat.
Wow.
And so they slowed the boat down so they would go slower because they could watch this all happening. And then they sailed further up the coast. So another 15 miles further, they got to like White Islets towards Seashell there. And that's usually full of seals and some couple of killer whales, big males with the big fins that figured out the seal deal. And so they were like having a nice seal lunch. And they started jumping out of the water and landing on the seal and doing all kinds of stuff. And so in one day they saw this, beautiful British Columbia, right?
Yeah,
They
you
had this
can't.
perfect sail with the wind behind them, two sets of Mother Nature stuff. But yeah, we live in a fantastic spot here.
Yeah, and it's just about being on the water. If you spend
Yeah.
enough time there, you're going to see stuff that you think you could only see in National Geographic.
Yeah.
I remember just 2 years ago, I saw the first, not the first time, but I saw a sea otter, not a river otter, on Barkley Sound, and it was out in the middle, like literally off a reef, like way out, like I'm talking even outside the Broken Group. It was in between the Broken Group and Ucluelet, and there it was, just sort of on its back. I was like, wow, a sea otter. I'm like, oh, that's insane. And then the other day we were there too, saw a bear swimming from island to island. Saw literally another time a sea lion literally come into the bay underneath the boat, find a salmon. How does a sea lion catch up to a salmon? I have no idea. Literally got shots and movies of this, literally shredding the salmon to pieces by just literally twisting its mouth. The fish went flying. There's shots of blood everywhere in the sky. And I'm like, I just saw a sea lion literally hunt a salmon. I'm like, and yeah, and that's just a sample of it. It doesn't happen every moment, but those memories stick with you. You remember them. There's obviously days where you see nothing, but then there's days where you see so much and you're like, oh my God. Yeah, it's incredible. Being on the water is awesome. So you talked about a little bit about what things are going. I want to go to the second part of that question a little bit. What do you see the future on the rigging side look like on your side? Like, what are the things that you think are sort of near future or just not so far away on the rigging in terms of innovation and stuff like that? What's sort of getting you like, what are your clients wanting, or what are the things that manufacturers are doing? Anything like that that you're seeing as big game changers in your industry?
Yeah. Well, you always have to kind of evaluate all the game changers that are happening, because a lot of them end up being so complicated no one can use them. So they
Right.
have their introduction has a short lifespan because
Mm,
the technology isn't necessarily user friendly.
right.
And
Sure.
so, around here, it's quite different. Like in Europe, it's generally a little bit windier. So people are more committed to kind of stuff like that. Around here, there's not enough wind, so they just motor. And like, yeah, people want better fuel economy on their diesel motor. So we got to try and keep them focused on like, okay, you have a sailboat, you're supposed to sail. And it
Yeah.
makes it really difficult. But yeah, like the biggest technology changes that we've seen are like some people are embracing better sails instead of just like a low price stacker on sale, because if you can sail your boat faster and it's more efficient, then
Mm,
you'll motor less and sail more.
yeah.
So generally speaking, it's not that we rarely have the chance of there being too much wind. It's all trying to make our boats work better in lighter winds. So that's why we have these cruising spinnakers, because they're way more sail area and you
Yeah.
can sail in lighter winds.
Is
And
that called a Jenniker as well? Is that what it's called as
yeah,
well?
Jenniker, yeah.
Yeah.
And then some of the newer ones are like code zeros and stuff,
Mm,
and they have a code one. So the code zero and code one technology kind of comes from the European design boats like the Hansa and some of the Bavarias, where they have great big mainsails and little tiny jibs. So quite different from the Catalina that you have with quite a large jib. They have like a non-overlapping headsail. So as soon as the wind's under 10 knots, they don't go. The boat basically doesn't move. And so by putting this enormous, big, lightweight sail up, then the boat becomes actually super lively and actually very exhilarating. So
yeah.
that's a big thing, is just allowing in light airs to have more sail area without too much fuss, because no one wants to go running around getting more ropes up and doing all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I've heard of boaters as well. Code Zero is popular for offshore. I've heard of that too. People going places. I've heard of it. Don't have one, but I've definitely heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever do the now tell so the Big Maui, what about Van Isle? Have you done the Van Isle
Yeah.
races?
I've been on the Van Isle 3 times, but I've never done the whole way around at one whack because it's just so much time in the summer.
Mm,
And it's actually not even the summer, it's always in early June. So we're still kind of ramped up in our industry in early June. And it's a long time. There's a lot of rest times on the Van Isle 360. So when I go sailing, I like to go sailing. So it's good to be social, but it's like too long. But the Van
yeah, I'll
Isle
tell you.
360, it is tremendously exciting. Like to go
Yeah.
to all these little towns and to sail up Johnson Strait. I haven't done the leg from Nanaimo to Campbell River, but I've gotten on in Campbell River and done the whole east side of Vancouver Island from Campbell River up to Port Hardy and around the top to Winter Harbor. And not very many people know, but I spent a tremendous amount of time kayaking as well. So that's how I introduced my kids really to the water, was kayaking and doing kayak camping trips on the north coast of Vancouver Island.
You
So
were
you're
when
so
we talked
close to
about
the
this,
water. I love that stuff.
you're talking on the west side, or are you talking on the east side of Vancouver Island that you're doing the
Well,
kayaking?
we go on the west side up high, so Cayucot and that area, and then down to Nootka Sound and that area. And then we've done up by Telegraph Cove on the inside,
Mm,
which to go see the whales, which is just fantastic. Just up north of Robson Bight.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
You
it's
have to be in a kayak and have a killer whale. Well, we've had like, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 killer whales just going around our kayaks and going underneath and coming up on the other side and then continually doing loops around you. And it's, and yeah, we're just so fortunate here to have nature like this,
it's amazing.
and that they aren't hungry.
Yeah, it's the way I describe it is they choose not to eat us. It's just a choice. They're like,
Yeah,
you know
it's a
what?
choice.
It's
It's a
not
good
worth.
choice they have.
Yeah, it's just like it's just not worth the bother. It's just not
Yeah.
worth it. Yeah, the kayaking is amazing, and I agree. Being on the water, you get to see nature really close up.
Oh yeah.
You get same thing. I just saw recently kayaking. Saw a pod of killer whales passing beside a colony of seals, not sea lions, but seals. And honestly, the killer whales, they must have been, I don't know, 100 yards, 300 feet, which feels like honestly like you're right there. Like I didn't live what you're talking about. It was, and I had binoculars so you could see them up close. And even that, just 100 yards from a killer whale, you're like, wow. The seals were definitely feeling it. They were like completely frozen, didn't even move. It was like a holdup in a bank, like freeze. Everybody, like they were all huddled, literally one beside each other. They were barely breathing. They were like, shh, shut it, as the killer whales are just passing by. And then we got to see it. And again, you couldn't have seen that. Sea kayak doesn't make any sound. You're not really intruding on anyone's life. They just keep on doing their thing. Yeah, it's incredible. It's just incredible. That's awesome. So you're now, tell me a little bit again about the culture of, because I've seen in your shop the culture of all these team members that you have. They seem to be really pulling in one direction. Like they seem to be really living your vision. Did you find that was hard to get team members to be doing that, or is that something that's happened over time? And now you've got a great team. It just feels that the vibe. It just seems like they know where the ship's got to be going, and it sounds like they're really into it. Was that something that grew over time, or is it something that you were able to inspire right from the get go with all your staff and team members helping out
Yeah.
on boats?
Well, it makes it easier when our customers embrace technology. Like they have
Mhm.
to embrace the fact that we're trying to make everything work better for them. And then we can demonstrate it pretty easily when we go to a boat. And because that's what we're doing, you know, they don't have any fun if a person doesn't want to spend money.
Yeah.
If a person just wants to go with the lowest level of technology, which is a crummy piece of rope, and we tell them like, this would make your boat way better, they don't embrace that, and that's not a good day at work for them. But
Mm,
if our customers have confidence that we're going to make their boat work better for them and take regard that their money is being well spent, then the customer is happy. And then my guys are totally keen because they go the extra level to make it work because they understand like this guy's going out on a limb kind of because he doesn't understand just what we talked earlier. Everyone's an expert at what they do. So I don't ask my customer what they do and tell them that they should be doing it different. Like they need to kind of have confidence that we're professionals in what we do. And my guys, they're working and playing with all these different fibers and materials and everything else. And when we're finished, like their boat's going to be better. Like I have, my guys have no sense or qualm that we're never going to make anything worse. Like that's not why we're on the planet. And the
yeah.
boat's going to work better. And so when everyone embraces that, then it's a good day for all the guys in the shop. And that if someone doesn't feel comfortable with hiring us, but they hired us anyways, that's not a good day in the shop
Yeah.
because
It's so true.
there's no confidence. So
Yeah.
yeah, my guys like they're great guys, and we have all different levels. We have everything from the welder down to the guy chopping up chunks of metal to Simon designing some fancy thing out of stainless steel. Like everyone feels good as long as the customers are happy and are embracing the fact that we're making their boat better. And
It's the
yeah,
biggest reward, I think, even for myself. I remind that exactly what you're saying, Stuart. The biggest paycheck, honestly, you could be making 10 million a year, 100, it doesn't matter. If your clients aren't unhappy, it's really hard to feel good about yourself. Even if you could have the biggest paycheck, it's just you want to drive people to be happy with their part of the being part of their dream. And this is maybe some things that sometimes I hammer is like, this is not just anything. This is for many of us, boating is a lifelong sort of, it's an obsession. It's a beyond a hobby. It's a lifestyle. And if we can make those boats better, then the clients are going to be extremely thankful. And I'm not talking about thankful by paying their invoice, but I'm just thankful like, yes, you've made my boat better. Boating is now safer, better. And you feel like, wow, I was part of your journey in actually accomplishing the dreams that you set out to, again, I started dreaming about boating when I was 4. I didn't have a dad that was building a boat at 10, but let me tell you, I was applying a lot of pressure. My dad can't swim, so it didn't happen. So I had to do it on my own. But yeah, being part of that dream, and as a technician, when I used to do the work, you feel so good about giving someone the feeling that, yeah, my boat is actually now closer to what I was hoping to have
yeah,
and bridging that gap. It's super powerful, super
yeah.
powerful.
People give us they have to give us lots of confidence to make their life better and their boat better. Otherwise, the partnership doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't.
No,
It really
no,
does.
people don't get out of it what they should get,
Yeah,
which is
it's so
like
true. So true.
a fact that they know it's going to be efficient and safe and make their life better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for taking some of your time and sharing a little bit about your stories about boating with us,
Yeah.
Stuart. And for all the listeners, thank you for joining us on this podcast, sharing our passion about boating and everything related to boating, because there's never enough of boating stuff. And again, Stuart, thank you so much for your time. And I want to say it means a lot that there's other people out there like yourself and your crew that care. I mean, that's what it is, right? It's
Yeah.
loving what you do and being passionate about it is definitely one part of the success of delivering great service to all our clients and voters out there. So thank you, Stuart, for joining me.
Yeah, and we love working with all the youth out there, So we sponsor that big youth regatta in West Van because they're the next guys. They're
Yeah,
going to be the next customers. And the whole sailing industry right now is we're all kind of on a roll, but people are entering the industry, this whole boating lifestyle at a huge rate, huge rate.
yeah,
The youth at West Van that are doing sailing and racing and that kind of stuff, we've gone from having a steady run of about 15 to 35 kids. Now it's shooting around 90 youth are involved in coaching. And so that means every week there's like 90 kids out there, and we're hiring then the older youth to coach, right? So we're creating this whole network. Like, it's just not like youth sailing, but then you have the next level, then you have the next level of managers that are managing all this. And it's incredible the amount of people. And these are going to be our future boaters. Like the people that work for me that do rigging work, most of them were youth sailors because they got the bug and they decided not to do the corporate world, and others have done university and other stuff. And they've come back and said, no, they'd rather just kind of work with their hands and work with people that have boats, right? So that's all the future. It's looking positive, Jeff.
It is.
It's
It is
good.
always looking positive, and it's a sunny day in Vancouver, so it's hard not to be in a good mood right now. Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
it's
Thank you,
really good.
Stuart.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff.
That's awesome.